I'm Jyotika Sapeng.
And I'm Supapan Sansap, and welcome to Crash Crowd Economy.
In the last few videos, we have said a lot of nice things about how competitive market allocate resources. They do pretty good job.
But nobody perfect. Sometimes market get it wrong, sometimes they fail, sometimes the byproduct of production make people sick. Today we are going to talk about those market failures and how economy address them. In 2015, a story made the law online about a University of Maryland professors and an extra credit question. Select whether you want 2 point or 6 point added onto your final paper grade. But there's more catch. If more than 10% of the class select 6 point, then no one get any points. So, what would to do? The question alludes to one of the biggest problems with free markets. Sometimes people have a personal incentive to do something that is against the collective interest of the group. Obviously, everyone wants at least some extra credit, but there is also an incentive to get even more points. In this situation, the professor reported that too many people choose 6 point and no one get extra credit. Let's say that your local government sends a similar proposition to every household in your city. Select whether you want to pay $20 or $100 to fund the local fire department, but there's more catch. If more than 50% of citizens choose $20, then not going to be enough money to have a fire department. This is the free rider problem. Free riders are people who benefit without paying. They are not necessarily evil. In fact, you probably know someone that illegally downloaded Game of Thrones, but they're responding to incentive. Why pay more if I can get it for less? If too many people think like this, then we are worse off and we are going to end up not getting the thing we want like fire protection or certifying ending to Game of Thrones. So how do more cities get around the problem? That some people will benefit even if they don't pay. The city doesn't ask for money, they demand money in the form of tax. The reasoning is that fire protection is so essential that people shouldn't be allowed to opt out.
So things that are for a collective well-being like fire protection, school and national defense are often funded by the government.
When market alone fail to provide enough of these things, this called market failure. These are often called public good, but the technical definitions of a public good is anything that have two characteristics: non-exclusions and non-frivolity. Non-exclusion is the idea that you could exclude people that don't pay.
For example, it's impossible to limit the benefits of national defense to only people that pay their taxes. People who pay no federal taxes still get the benefit of protections from bomb. And people who pay a lot of federal taxes don't get extra protection.
Non-rivalry is the idea that one person's consumption of the good doesn't ruin it for other people.
So public parks are a great example. You can use it today, I can use it tomorrow, it can be shared ideally. If a good or service meets these two criteria, it's unlikely that private firms will produce it. No matter how essential is it, streetlights and organizations that track and prevent the spread of diseases are important, and if the government doesn't step in, we probably wouldn't get them.
The incentive to do what's best for you rather than what's best for everyone is the root cause of something economic called the tragedy of the commons. This is the idea that common goods that everyone has access to are often misused and exploited. It explains the cause of most of our environmental problems like air pollution, deforestation, the killing of endangered species, and overfishing. In many places in the world, there are more fish being poured out of rivers, lakes, and oceans than are being born. This is not just bad for the fish, it's bad for the people doing the fishing. As these resources are depleted, fishermen find themselves without jobs, so why aren't they conserving, allowing fish to reproduce and generate more feed resources for the future? Well, look at the incentive. If a few environmentally conscious fishermen decide to give the fish time to spawn, then some other fishermen will harvest them instead. If you can prevent other people from exploiting the resource, then you have an incentive to exploit it yourself and take as much as you can, as quickly as you can. But with everyone following that logic, the finite resource gets pillaged. The tragedy of the commons explains why fish stocks get depleted, why the rainforests get cut down, and why endangered species get hunted for their hide or horns. There is an entire subfield of economics focus on address and solving this issue. It is called environmental economics.
The problem here is that unregulated markets sometimes don't produce the outcome that society wants. Remember, sometimes markets allocate resources because they don't have the right price signal. This is no better example of this than what economists call externalities. Externalities are a situation when these external costs or external benefits that accrue to other people or society as a whole. When other people are made worse off, that called a negative externality. When other people are made better off, that's called a positive externality.
Let's go to the true bubble. Let's look at a TV factory that's polluted a river with toxic chemicals. This is definitely a negative externality. The factory internal cost. It has to pay its workers, buy raw materials, pay for energy, and it uses those costs to determine how many TV to produce. But these are also external costs associated with polluting the waterway, like dead fish, contaminated drinking water, and people getting sick. Those external costs are paid by people downstream, and they are likely to be ignored by the factory owner. The free market assumes that all the costs associated with producing TV are accounted for within the price of the TV, but in this case, the market is wrong. The end result is a market failure because the factory is producing too many TV. As for positive externality, think of education. More education is great for you. You will likely generate more income and it makes you more interesting to talk to at party. But these are also external benefits of your education. Everyone is actually made better off. With more education, you are more likely to be a positive and productive member of society. And if you earn a higher income, that means more tax revenue. Now in both cases, negative and positive externality, economists often look to the government to step in and solve the problem. For example, the government could tax the TV factory or subsidize education. In fact, externality are the justification for almost everything the government does. When politicians tax cigarettes, fund education, subsidize flu, efficient cars, or regulate financial markets, it's because they are convinced that free market alone are not justified for externality.
Thank Thought Bubble. We try to explain the problem of externalities. Now let's talk about the solution. When the government tries to fix externalities, they can use regulatory policies or market-based policies. Regulatory policies are simple rules established by the government regime. Some people complain about regulation. They say, the government can tell me what to do, but let's be honest, it can't. The government also spends a ton of time and money telling you what you can't do. Don't drive too fast, don't build a house in Yellowstone, don't kill anybody. It seems like the government probably should regulate some stuff. The question is, how much should they regulate? Even people who adamantly oppose the government regulation probably agree that nuclear weapons and nerve gas shouldn't be on the shelf at Target. Let's go back to the TV factory example. To help solve the pollution externalities, the government could ban the use of certain types of chemical or set a production quota to limit the production of TVs or regulate what can be dumped in the river. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency has pushed for laws to control pollution, and these regulations have worked. Regulation can also create positive externalities. In some cases, the external benefits are perceived to be so high that the government essentially takes over the market. Consider education. Most countries have compulsory education which requires citizens to be educated up to a specific age, and the government pays for school through tax. If the government didn't get involved, all education would be provided by private schools that would charge tuition. There might not be enough affordable schools to educate young people. The government fund education because they think that the external benefits like literate, well-informed, erudite citizens are so high, it's worth forcing everyone to pay.
Another way that government try to show externality is with market rate policy. These are policies designed to manipulate market prices and incentives to correct for market failure. The best examples are taxes and subsidies.
A tax on productions of TV or on the chemical the factory is using will decrease productions and limit pollution. Federal grants that help subsidize college education will increase the amount of education people buy. In general, economists tend to prefer market-based policies. Take cigarettes. Cigarettes generate high external costs on society. Their secondhand smoke and their higher healthcare costs for everyone due to smoking-related illnesses. The government could force cigarette companies to produce less, or just shut them down entirely. But instead, they tax cigarettes. The tax drive up the price consumed by preferred cigarette, and this addresses the negative externality. Now, this market-based approach have one key advantage over the regulatory approach.
Instead of spending money on enforcing regulations, the government is earning tax revenue that can be used for purposes. In real life, the government often viewed both policies.
In the US, the government taxes cigarette producers and regulates where people can smoke. It's also listing how tobacco companies can advertise and support anti-smoking campaigns designed to convince people to quit smoking. Seriously, you should stop smoking.
Market-based approaches to reduce negative externality are also to fight climate change. Many economists argue that taxes on carbon-based fuel like coal, oil, and gas are a more effective way to deal with air pollution.
One of discusses market-based policy is emission trading or cap and trade. The government issues pollution permit, and if your factory doesn't hold one of those permits, it can pollute. But company can buy or sell those permits. This sets up incentive to go green. If you can produce without pollution, you can make money by selling your permit. But if you operate a dirty plant, you have to pay for those extra permits. As controversial as cap and trade can be among American politicians, it's interesting to note that it's already been used successfully in the US. A cap and trade program to reduce acid rain pollution. It worked. It cuts sulfur dioxide emission, according to a 2010 report from the Office of Management and Budget. The acid rain program accounts for the largest quantified human health benefit of any major federal regulatory program implemented in the last 10 years, with benefit exceeding costs by more than 40 to 1. Remember that extra credit question. What if the world's largest economies were given a similar proposition? Select whether you want to decrease your pollution by 5% or 30% with a small catch. If more than 50% of countries shoot only 5%, then climate change will make Earth unlivable. That simplifies the issue, but it doesn't illustrate why it's so hard to address climate change. Individual countries might work to reduce carbon dioxide emission, but they can prevent other countries from polluting. It's the tragedy of the commons. In an unregulated economy, where producers want to make products as cheaply as possible, there's an incentive to ignore international environment to get ahead. Global issues like climate change, human rights abuses, and nuclear proliferation can be effectively addressed if countries don't work together, but that require a lot of trust and a lot of commitment.
So markets aren't perfect. There are many cases when the government should get involved, and these even some situations when the government should just take control.
The question isn't which is better, free market or government. The question is how can they work together to make our lives better. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.